In today's video, I'm going to share with you one of the hottest new techniques to catch giant smallmouth bass, and it's one that's already caught me a bunch of big smallmouth in 2024. You're not going to want to miss this one. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about really two techniques that have taken over the smallmouth fishing industry over the past couple of seasons. Now, these are both techniques that I've been throwing for probably the past 2 to 3 years to have a lot of success catching fish behind other anglers on really pressured bodies of water. And it's something that got exposed a little bit last year when the Elite Series came up to Lake St. Clair. And Luke Palmer, who's not really a smallmouth angler, almost won that event using what's called a Cindy rig. Now, in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Cindy rig and the sneaky underspin and talk about how to use those two techniques with and without forward-facing sonar to help you catch more smallmouth bass. Now, the one we're going to start with is the sneaky underspin, and this is one that I've been throwing for the past couple of seasons, and you guys have heard me talk about quite a bit. We're going to talk about how to utilize this technique along with the Cindy rig, which is essentially a ball head jig with a small minnow type plastic on the back, and this is a Great Lakes Finesse drop minnow, and how to use these techniques, which seem very simple, to catch really big smallmouth bass. Because as simple as they might seem, there's a time and place for these baits to work really effectively, and I'm going to break that down. Now let's start by defining the time of year that I'm throwing the Cindy and the Sneaky. Now for me, these are baits that I'm going to have tied on all year long, but really anytime that I'm targeting fish in less than 12 foot of water, let's say. In less than 12 foot of water is where I find these baits to be the most effective. Now, when I talk about this, you can obviously increase head size, you can increase the weight of the Sneaky and the Cindy, and you can still fish these deeper, but where I'm finding the most success fishing a 3/16 ounce Sneaky underspin and an 1/8 ounce ball head is in that less than 12 foot of water range. So when typically am I going to throw this? Post spawn, when those fish are just off bed, big mayfly or bug hatches, or when there's bait fish around shallow pieces of cover. This could be perch around grass, this could be emerald shiners, kind of roaming those shallows. This could be after, a bluegill spawn when those bluegill fry are still hanging out shallow. A lot of the times it's when these fish are hanging out and there's bait fish nearby in those shallow water areas, or if there's flies or other insects that those fish are feeding on. Anytime those fish are in less than 12 foot of water actively feeding, these approaches are going to be really effective. So a lot of guys, maybe up in northern Michigan or up in New York where you have those glacial bodies of water, this may have a limited time span for you guys. When those fish aren't pushed up on the shallow flat, they're out over deep water, that's when I'm going to probably put these baits down unless you're using them in conjunction with forward-facing sonar. Now here's where a lot of guys are going to put them down and just never throw them, but my buddy Ethan is going up north fishing these baits over 30 to 60 foot of water and having a lot of success targeting suspended fish with forward-facing using the Sneaky and the Cindy rig. Essentially what you're doing is you're targeting them with forward facing. You're using these tiny profile baits, this 1/8 ounce stealth ball head in a little 275 drop minnow. It's just a small presentation that looks like what these fish are feeding on and it gets those fish to bite. But my most effectiveness that I've had with these techniques has been in less than 12 foot of water. Now what I'm doing typically to find these fish is covering these massive flats. I'm looking for these fish on these giant flats where there's isolated pieces of cover and structure. There's isolated areas for these fish to hang out, and a lot of it's going to be found using my eyes. There's one. Braid? Question mark? I can't turn it. I can't tell if you're big or not. Yeah, you look pretty big. Thank you, buddy.
big are you?
This is a really cool time of year when these fish are up on these shallow areas, because a lot of what you're fishing can be seen with your eyes, can kind of be seen or found by just winding around, and that's where you're going to really start to dial in where these fish are located. So what I'm going to do is get up on these big flats, and I'll turn that trolling motor on 3 or 4. You're going to want to use a lot of stealth, and you're going to want to kind of creep along these flats, making fan casts with your Cindy or your Sneaky. Now what you're going to be doing now is looking with your eyes in the water for dark patches, or if you want to use electronics, looking for those bottom composition changes where those fish can be hanging out. Now some of my key areas on these flats are those areas where you have a channel swing nearby, deep water adjacent, or you have these big spawning flats that you know the fish have just gotten off of and they're moving back out towards deeper water. These are going to be the key areas in the flats that I'm looking for, that I'm having success with. And then I'm using my eyes, I'm using my electronics to look for those isolated areas that these fish can hang out on. And what you're going to do is you're going to cast this bait past the object that you're trying to fish, and you're going to just use a slow, steady retrieve. You don't need to change your retrieve or pop it. It's super slow, steady retrieve. Bring it past that isolated piece of cover or structure, and that will trigger those fish to bite. But most of those bites are going to come as soon as you come past that piece of cover or isolated dark patch or isolated structure change, and those fish are going to come out of that area and either track that bait and eat it immediately, or you're just going to feel them get heavy and you lean in and you catch them. And I've had a ton of success using this strategy, covering those shallow flats, looking for those isolated areas where fish can be hanging out. And it could be something as simple as a dark spot on the bottom. Maybe it's a marl patch growing in a big sand flat, or it's a little log with some grass growing around it. Or it could be a slight depression where it drops from 4 to 6 foot of water and those fish are hanging out on the edge. This is a great technique that will draw fish to the bait, and you're going to get a lot of bites doing this. So you're really going to use this as a search tool to locate areas or spots where fish are hanging out, and then you can go either use this bait to pick those areas apart or pick them apart with other techniques. But this is a great search tool that's going to get you a lot of bites, so you want to mark a lot of waypoints on each and every bite, and then you can start to refine and figure out exactly why those fish are there. Now when we were up on Hubbard, this is actually how I found our second place spot. I was casting around obviously with the top water on day 1, and then I picked that area apart with the Sneaky Underspin, and I was able to really dial in the areas that the majority of those fish were hanging out. And then we had to go pick it apart with a drop shot and a Ned rig to get those fish to bite once they locked down and started locking down on bed. But this Sneaky Underspin technique and this strategy was what helped us have a second place finish on Hubbard Lake, which is really, really incredible, because that was a tournament that I wasn't sure how we were going to do. But that Sneaky Underspin really helped me dial in these areas to have success on that lake. It's going to excite a lot of you, and it excites me as well, because it really has a ton of drawing power to trigger fish to bite. Now, when we talk about drawing power, what I'm talking about is that bait's ability to draw fish to that bait from a long ways away. Now, a lot of guys, when they think of drawing power, they think about big glide baits. They think about spinner baits that are going to call fish up. They think about top waters that are going to draw fish to them. But there's something about that little drop minnow and that Sneaky Underspin and that ball head that will just draw fish to this bait. In my opinion, the biggest factor about the drawing power is the fact that it looks so natural in the water. So when you start to talk about the Sneaky Underspin and the drop minnow, you're talking about drawing power, bringing these fish to that bait from long distances, because it really has a do-nothing action. It's something unlike what they've already seen swimming by them. They've seen hundreds of swim baits, they've seen hundreds of spinner baits, they've seen jerk baits, which will have some sort of drawing power, but this small presentation slowly coming through the water is something almost so natural and so unsuspecting that it draws fish to this bait from a long ways away. And it is a very small profile. So where I'm using this bait to have the best drawing power, to draw the most fish to that, is in what I would consider clear or normal clarity water conditions. Now, when am I going to be throwing the Cindy versus the Sneaky rig? For me, it's going to be looking at the clarity of the water. Okay, so when I get up to my body of water, is the clarity normal? Is it normal, general, normal clarity? If it is, I'm going to start with the Cindy rig. So for me, the Cindy is just the overall fish catcher. Like, this is the one that you're going to start with. And then if you declare that that water is a little bit dirtier than normal, or if there's a lot of wind, or if there's a lot of sediment in the water, that's when I'm going to pick up the Sneaky Underspin. Now for me, this is my sequence. I'll start with the Cindy, then I'll go to the Sneaky, especially if there's some color in the water. That Sneaky is just going to give you a little bit extra flash, a little bit extra drawing power, and with that blade, it's going to help draw these fish to the bait. No different than if you're throwing a spinner bait versus a swim bait. The spinner bait's going to put off that flash, that pulse. It's going to draw fish to that bait from a longer ways away. That's basically my thought process with throwing the Sneaky versus the Cindy. The Cindy is the one that's super subtle. It's going to draw fish to it if they can see it, if they can find it. But the Sneaky is going to give you that little bit extra flash and advantage to draw those fish to that bait. Or if it's overcast, if you get up to your body of water, maybe the clarity is good. Fish are going to be able to see that bait from a long ways away. But it's overcast, it's cloudy, it's windy. These fish don't seem to be in a chasing mood. Switching up to that Sneaky underspin can be a really key adjustment to help you catch fish. Now, when I was up on Hubbard practicing for that tournament, to be honest, I was catching a lot of fish just throwing the Cindy around, winding to them. But when I got up there and I started kind of trying to figure out what these fish were doing, they started getting off of the Cindy. That's when I picked up the Sneaky because it was overcast, it was really windy, it was rainy, there was some color in the water. So I switched to the Sneaky underspin with the gold blade, and this is actually the one that I was throwing up there. They started biting this thing. They started eating it really, really well, and I believe that blade just really helped those fish key in on the overall presentation. So knowing which one to use is going to take some judgment and time on the water with these baits, but my typical progression is going to be to start with the Cindy rig if the water's pretty clear and those fish are in less than 12 foot of water, and if it's overcast or the water gets a little bit off-colored, switch to the Sneaky underspin with the blade. Now let's talk about the gear that I'm using. So if we start with the Sneaky underspin, obviously I'm throwing the Great Lakes Finesse Sneaky underspin. Now, I'm typically less than 12 foot of water going with the 3/16 ounce head. This I find to be really effective. You can fish pretty much that entire 12 foot range with this. And for the blade color, I'll kind of mix and match. So if it's really sunny and clear, and I know those fish are keyed in on tiny little minnows or bait fish, I'll probably go with the silver blade. If it's overcast, cloudy, maybe the water's a little bit dirty, or they're keying in on perch, I really like that gold blade. Typically, I'm going to start with the gold blade. It really matches kind of our water clarities up here in Michigan really effectively. And then if it gets really clear, I'm on those Great Lakes bodies of water where they're keyed in on small shiners or shad, that silver blade is going to be effective. The color drop minnow that I'm going to put on the back is going to be dependent on what those fish are keyed on. And there's really three main colors that I like to use, but it can, again, depend on the body of water that you're fishing. So when I was throwing this, they were keyed in on mayflies. There was a big mayfly hatch going on. So the color I have on the back of there is just straight green pumpkin. I think that matches those mayflies almost perfectly, matches those mayfly larvae really, really effectively. But my go-to number one color to start out with is going to be black. So I'm going to throw black to start out. If they kind of don't seem to like black, the water's a little bit clear, they're keyed in on bait fish, then I'll go to green pumpkin. And if they're keyed in on shad, then you can throw like a shad or a crushed shad style color. But there is one color that I haven't mentioned that I've had a ton of success with, and I think it is water body dependent. Okay, so I don't know why this color was so effective up on Hubbard, but this spicy melon color when the water was clear was a deadly, deadly color. Now this is a color that looks kind of goofy. It's like a really light watermelon with some silver and gold flake. In that really clean water of Hubbard Lake, that off green colored water, spicy melon was really effective. Now I've seen this be effective on St. Lawrence. I've seen this be effective on other bodies of water as well. KVD Kick is a similar color to this really light watermelon with that gold and silver flake. There's something about this color that triggers fish, especially in clean water situations when it's sunny outside. So spicy melon is another color I recommend you guys checking out. And when we start to talk about the Cindy rig, the Cindy for me is super, super simple. It's going to be an 1/8 ounce ball head, stealth ball head from Great Lakes Finesse, and then just drop minnow on the back. Kind of same theory with the colors. Start out with the black, go to green pumpkin if they're feeding on bait fish or mayflies, and then go to shad colors or go to that spicy melon depending on your body of water. But super simple. That 1/8 ounce ball head from Great Lakes Finesse with a 1/0 hook is my go-to for the Cindy rig. And the rod that I'm going to throw both of these techniques on is a Temple Fork Outfitter 7.6 medium light. Now this is the Tactical Elite model. I don't believe this is made anymore, but it is my favorite. It bends really deep into the blank. It allows you to cast that light bait really, really effectively. and it's going to help you keep those fish pinned when they bite at the end of a long cast. Then I'm going to throw it on a 3,000 size, slower gear ratio spinning reel. This is a 5-speed with 8-pound test braided line to 6-pound test fluorocarbon. Overall, it's a super simple approach. Make a long cast, use stealth to your advantage, straight retrieve, and you're going to have a lot of success with the Cindy and Sneaky rig on your bodies of water. Now, if you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button down below, and check out all the gear that I mentioned in today's video, linked down in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care, Ted Lyons. God bless. Pursue your passion.